The Ancient City, Book 3, Chapter 7, The Religion of the City. 4. Religion in the Assembly, in the Senate, in the Tribunal, in the Army, in the Triumph. There was not a single act of public life in which the gods were not seen to take a part. As he was under the influence of the idea that they were, by turns, excellent protectors or cruel enemies, man never dared to act without being sure that they were favorable. The people assembled only on such days as religion permitted. They remembered that the city had suffered a disaster on a certain day. This was doubtless because on that day the gods had been either absent or irritated. They would probably be in the same mood at the same season every year, for reasons unknown to mortals. This day, therefore, was forever unlucky. There were no assemblies, no courts. Public life was suspended. At Rome, before an assembly proceeded to business, the augurs were required to declare that the gods were propitious. The assembly commenced with a prayer, which the augur pronounced, and which the consul repeated after him. There was the same custom among the Athenians. The assembly always commenced by a religious act. Priests offered a sacrifice. A large circle was then traced by pouring lustral water upon the ground, and within this sacred circle the citizens assembled. Before any orator began to speak, a prayer was pronounced before the silent people. The auspices were also consulted, and if any unfavorable sign appeared in the heavens, the assembly broke up at once. The tribune, or speaker's stand, was a sacred place, and the orator never ascended it without a crown upon his head. The place of assembly of the Roman Senate was always a temple. If a session had been held elsewhere than in the sacred place, its acts would have been null and void, for the gods would not have been present. Before every deliberation, the president offered a sacrifice and pronounced a prayer. In the hall there was an altar, where every senator on entering offered a libation, at the same time invoking the gods. The Athenian Senate was little different. The hall also contained an altar and a sacred fire. A religious ceremony was observed at the opening of each session. Every senator on entering approached the altar and pronounced a prayer. While the session lasted, every senator wore a crown upon his head, as in religious ceremonies. At Rome, as well as at Athens, courts of justice were open in the city only on such days as religion pronounced favorable. At Athens, the session of the court was held near an altar, and commenced with a sacrifice. In Homer's time, the judges assembled in a holy circle. Festus says that in the rituals of the Etruscans were directions as to the founding of a city, the consecration of a temple, the arrangement of curies and tribes in a public assembly, and the ranging of an army in order of battle. All these things were marked in the ritual, because all these things were connected with religion. In war, religion was as influential, at least, as in peace. In the Italian cities, there were colleges of priests, called fetiales, who presided, like the heralds among the Greeks, at all the sacred ceremonies to which international relations gave rise. A fetialis, veiled, and with a crown upon his head, declared war by pronouncing a sacramental formula. At the same time, the consul, in priestly robes, offered a sacrifice, and solemnly opened the temple of the most venerated and most ancient divinity of Italy. Before setting out on an expedition, the army being assembled, the general repeated prayers and offered a sacrifice. The custom was the same at Athens and at Sparta. During a campaign, the army presented the image of the city. Its religion followed it. The Greeks took with them the statues of their divinities. Every Greek or Roman army carried with it a hearth, on which the sacred fire was kept up night and day. A Roman army was accompanied by augurs and pularii, feeders of the sacred chickens. Every Greek army had a diviner. Let us examine a Roman army at a moment when it is preparing for battle. The consul orders a victim to be brought, and strikes it with the axe. It falls. Its entrails will indicate the will of the gods. The auruspex examines them, and if the signs are favorable, the consul gives the signal for battle. The most skillful dispositions, the most favorable circumstances, are of no account if the gods do not permit the battle. The fundamental principle of the military art among the Romans was to be able to put off a battle when the gods were opposed to it, It was for this reason that they made a sort of citadel of their camp every day. Let us now examine a Greek army, and we will take for example the Battle of Plataea. The Spartans are drawn up in line. Each one has his post for battle. They all have crowns upon their heads, and the flute players sound the religious hymns. The king, a little in the rear of the ranks, slaughters the victims, but the entrails do not give the favorable signs, and the sacrifice must be repeated. 2, 3, 4 victims are successively immolated. During this time, the Persian cavalry approach, shoot their arrows, and kill quite a number of Spartans. The Spartans remain immovable, their shields placed at their feet, without even putting themselves on their defensive against the arrows of the enemy. They await the signal of the gods. At last, the victims offer the favorable signs. Then the Spartans raise their shields, seize their swords, and move on to battle, and are victorious. After every victory they offer a sacrifice, and this is the origin of the triumph, which is so well known among the Romans, and which was not less common among the Greeks. This custom was a consequence of the opinion which attributed the victory to the gods of the city. Before the battle, the army had addressed a prayer to them, like the one we read in Aeschylus. "To you, O gods, who inhabit and possess our land, if our arms are fortunate and if our city is saved, I promise to sprinkle your altars with the blood of sheep, to sacrifice bulls to you, and to hang up in your holy temples the trophies conquered by the spear." By virtue of this promise, the victor owed a sacrifice. The army entered the city to offer it, and repaired to the temple, forming a long procession and singing a sacred hymn, Triambos. At Rome, the ceremony was very nearly the same. The army marched in procession to the principal temple of the city. The priests walked at the head of the cortege, leading victims. On reaching the temple, the general sacrificed the victims to the gods. On their way, the soldiers all wore crowns, as was becoming in a sacred ceremony, and sang a hymn, as in Greece. There came a time indeed when the soldiers did not scruple to replace the hymn, which they did not understand, by barrack songs and raillery at their general. But they still preserved the custom of repeating the refrain, Io triumphe. Indeed, it was this refrain which gave the name to the ceremony. Thus, in time of peace, as in wartime, religion intervened in all acts. It was everywhere present. It enveloped man. The soul, the body, private life, public life, meals, festivals, assemblies, tribunals, battles, all were under the empire of this city religion. It regulated all the acts of man, disposed of every instant of his life, fixed all his habits. It governed a human being with an authority so absolute that there was nothing beyond its control. One would have a very false idea of human nature to believe that this ancient religion was an imposture and, so to speak, a comedy. Montesquieu pretends that the Romans adopted a worship only to restrain the people. A religion never had such an origin, and every religion that has come to sustain itself only from motives of public utility has not stood long. Montesquieu has also said that the Romans subjected religion to the state. The contrary is true. It is impossible to read many pages of Livy without being convinced of this. Neither the Romans nor the Greeks knew anything of those sad conflicts between church and state which have been so common in other societies. But this is due solely to the fact that at Rome as well as at Sparta and Athens, the state was enslaved by its religion, or rather, the state and religion were so completely confounded that it was impossible even to distinguish the one from the other, to say nothing of forming an idea of a conflict between the two.